The lonely mafia boss finally met the woman he loved. Then he couldn't speak. The first bullet struck the crystal glass only inches from his hand. It exploded across the mahogany desk, showering expensive whiskey onto stacks of confidential files. Every guard inside the penthouse reached for a weapon before the echo even faded. No one dared breathe. Not because of the sniper, because the man standing at the panoramic window never moved. Lorenzo De Luca, the most feared mafia boss in Europe, continued staring over the glittering skyline as if death had merely interrupted his thoughts instead of trying to claim his life. His empire stretched across ports, banks, casinos, and governments. Politicians feared his phone calls more than elections. Rival families disappeared after whispering his name. Entire cities adjusted their routines around his decisions. Yet that morning, none of those things mattered. His eyes weren't fixed on the shattered window. They were fixed on a woman walking alone on the street nearly 30 floors below. She carried a paper bag filled with groceries. She smiled politely at an elderly man crossing the road. She looked completely unaware that one of the world's deadliest men had been watching her every morning for nearly 6 months. Then she suddenly looked up. Their eyes met, for one impossible second. And something happened inside Lorenzo that had never happened before. His heartbeat lost its rhythm. His breathing stopped. His lips opened, but no sound came out. The feared mafia king, who could order executions without blinking, suddenly couldn't speak a single word. He had finally found the woman he loved. So why did it feel as if fate had already decided to take her away? The criminal underworld called Lorenzo many names. The Ghost King, the Silent Emperor, the Untouchable. He accepted none of them. Names meant emotions. Emotions created weakness. Weakness buried powerful men. At 38 years old, Lorenzo ruled an organization that had survived 4 generations of bloodshed. His father built fear. His grandfather built wealth. Lorenzo built control. Unlike older mafia bosses who relied on violence alone, he transformed the De Luca family into an invisible empire. Every legal business had another illegal one beneath it. Every politician owed someone. Every judge feared exposure. Every enemy eventually discovered there were worse things than dying. He rarely smiled. He never celebrated victories. Birthdays passed unnoticed. Christmas dinners became business meetings. The mansion that overlooked the Mediterranean held more guards and family members. Its enormous dining table could seat 40 guests. Most nights only one chair was occupied. Loneliness eventually stopped feeling painful. It simply became routine. His advisors often encouraged marriage. A wife would strengthen alliances, produce heirs, improve public image. Lorenzo rejected every proposal. Love distracted kings. Marriage created leverage. Children became hostages. He convinced himself isolation was a price of survival. For years, he believed it, until one rainy Tuesday changed everything. The cafe was tiny. Old wooden tables, faded paintings, the smell of fresh bread and roasted coffee. Lorenzo entered only because his armored convoy had been forced to stop after unexpected road construction blocked the boulevard. His security team insisted they relocate. Instead, he chose coffee. Every customer froze the moment they recognized him. Some quietly left. Others pretended not to notice. Only one person treated him like an ordinary customer. The waitress. She approached carrying a notebook already stained with coffee rings. Her dark hair had escaped its loose braid. There was flour on one sleeve. She looked exhausted, but her smile felt genuine. "What can I get for you?" She had no idea who he was. Or perhaps she didn't care. His bodyguards exchanged confused looks. Nobody addressed Lorenzo so casually. Most people trembled. She simply waited. He ordered black coffee. Nothing else. She nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Minutes later, she returned. Without asking permission, she placed a small slice of homemade lemon cake beside his cup. "You look like someone who forgot what sweetness tastes like." Then she walked away before he could respond. No fear, no flirting, no hidden agenda, only kindness. Lorenzo stared at the cake for several minutes. No assassin had ever confused him this much. Her name was Elena Marino, 29 years old, worked double shifts, lived in a small apartment, no criminal record, no wealthy relatives, no suspicious financial activity. After leaving the cafe that day, Lorenzo ordered the most thorough background investigation his intelligence network had ever conducted on an ordinary civilian. Weeks of surveillance produced almost nothing. She volunteered at an animal shelter every Sunday, paid overdue rent whenever she could, sent money to a nursing home every month, read books during lunch breaks, sometimes cried alone after closing the cafe, never asked anyone for help. The reports frustrated him. Everyone hid something. She didn't. His investigators kept searching anyway. Nothing changed. Eventually, even his intelligence chief admitted the impossible. "Boss, we found no lies." That should have ended everything. Instead, it became the beginning. Lorenzo altered meetings simply to drive past a cafe. He learned which bus she usually missed, which flowers she paused to admire outside a florist's window, which songs she hummed while sweeping the sidewalk before opening. He never approached, never spoke, never interfered. Watching became enough. Or at least he convinced himself it was. His captains noticed subtle differences. He canceled unnecessary executions. Negotiations ended peacefully more often. He spent longer periods outside headquarters. Nobody understood why. Only Lorenzo knew. The woman serving coffee every morning had begun changing a man who believed he was beyond saving. Elena never realized someone powerful protected her. Twice she narrowly avoided robberies because unknown men scared away criminals before they acted. A reckless drunk driver disappeared after almost hitting her. A landlord suddenly reduced her overdue rent without explanation. Medical bills for her mother vanished anonymously. She assumed Luck had finally remembered her. She never imagined Luck carried automatic weapons. Months passed. Lorenzo remained silent. Then fate stopped waiting. One evening, Elena left work later than usual. Rain soaked empty streets. Most shops had already closed. She hurried beneath a broken umbrella while reading a message from a nursing home. She didn't notice the black SUV slowing beside her. The side door opened. 3 masked men jumped out. Professional. Fast. One covered her mouth. Another injected something into her neck. She struggled. The groceries scattered across the wet pavement. Within seconds, her body weakened. Across the street, a homeless man watching from beneath cardboard quietly touched the earpiece hidden beneath his dainty hair. Package compromised. Inside Lorenzo's headquarters, every monitor changed simultaneously. His security commander looked toward the boss. No words were necessary. Lorenzo had already disappeared from his chair. 6 armored vehicles exploded out of the underground garage less than 30 seconds later. Traffic lights across 3 districts suddenly malfunctioned. Police patrol routes changed after anonymous emergency calls redirected them elsewhere. Bridges closed. Road cameras shut down. The city unknowingly transformed into Lorenzo's battlefield. The kidnappers believed they had planned the perfect operation. None of them realized they had kidnapped the only woman capable of awakening a monster who had spent years sleeping inside himself. The pursuit lasted 11 minutes. The kidnappers switched vehicles twice, used underground parking garages, cross-industrial districts, professional tactics, military precision. Someone powerful had funded the operation. Inside the lead SUV, Elena drifted in and out of consciousness. She heard unfamiliar voices, foreign accents. One sentence reached her clearly. The buyer wants her alive. Buyer? She couldn't understand. Why would anyone buy an ordinary waitress? Meanwhile, Lorenzo personally drove the lead pursuit vehicle. His security chief begged him to remain behind. He ignored every warning. Speed limits became meaningless. Rain blurred headlights into streaks of silver. Every second increased the distance between him and the only woman who had unknowingly made him question the life he had built. Then, his encrypted phone vibrated. Unknown number. He answered without slowing. A calm male voice laughed softly. "So, the great Lorenzo De Luca finally found someone he loves." Silence. "You've hidden your feelings well, but not well enough." Lorenzo tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The stranger continued. "If you want the girl back, you'll surrender your entire northern territory." Another pause. "And if you refuse, you'll receive her heart in a silver box." The call ended. For the first time in over 15 years, Lorenzo felt something stronger than anger. Fear. Not for himself. For her. The emotion was so unfamiliar that he barely recognized it. And in that terrifying moment, the lonely Mafia king realized his greatest weakness had never been discovered by his enemies. It had only just been created. For 12 years, Lorenzo De Luca had never negotiated under pressure. Governments had threatened him. Cartels had challenged him. Rival families had declared war. His answer had always been the same: destroy them before they believed they had chance. But this time was different. The woman trapped inside that speeding convoy wasn't a captain, an accountant, or a political ally. She was the only person who had ever looked at him without fear, without greed, and without expecting anything in return. For the first time in his life, Lorenzo understood why kings throughout history had sacrificed kingdom for love. The realization disgusted him, because it also made him vulnerable. His convoy raced through the rain-soaked industrial district, while drones launched from hidden rooftops above the city. Tiny cameras immediately began tracking every highway, warehouse, dockyard, and abandoned factory within 50 kilometers. His intelligence network activated in less than 60 seconds. Every paid informant received one message: find the woman. No other mission mattered. Inside the black SUV, Elena struggled to stay conscious. The sedative clouded her thoughts, but instinct refused to let her surrender completely. She could hear engines, rain hitting the roof, the muffled voices of men who never once called her by name. To them, she wasn't Elena. She was cargo. One of the kidnappers pulled a photograph from his pocket. It showed her leaving the cafe several weeks earlier. Another picture captured her feeding stray cats. Another showed her visiting the nursing home. Someone had been watching her for months. The realization sent cold fear through her body. She had never been chosen at random. The convoy suddenly entered an abandoned shipping terminal near the coast. Massive cargo containers formed narrow steel corridors. Perfect terrain for an ambush. The kidnappers transferred Elena into another vehicle. Professional, disciplined. They changed routes every few minutes. Whoever planned the operation clearly understood how Lorenzo hunted his enemies. Unfortunately for them, they underestimated how far he was willing to go. Inside headquarters, Lorenzo's intelligence chief finally identified the first clue. The surveillance photos weren't taken by local crews. Lorenzo looked up. What does that mean? They're military-grade lenses. Imported. Another analyst interrupted. We've also traced a burner phone. Where? It bounced through 8 countries. Everyone became silent. Only one organization possessed that level of operational sophistication: the Black Serpents, a criminal syndicate so secretive that even Mafia families rarely spoke their name aloud. Unlike traditional crime organizations, the Black Serpents didn't control territory. They sold people, scientists, politicians, children, witnesses, anyone with value. If someone paid enough, they could disappear anyone. Lorenzo closed his eyes for only a second. Then he understood. Elena had never been the target. He was. Someone had finally discovered the one thing capable of controlling him. Across the Mediterranean, inside an ancient fortress converted into a private estate, an elderly man watched the operation through live satellite feeds. His name was Viktor Sokolov, former intelligence officer, current leader of the Black Serpents. He smiled while sipping tea. Remarkable. One of his advisors nodded. Should we prepare negotiations? Victor shook his head. No, I don't want his territory. The advisor frowned. Then why take the woman? The old man's smile widened. I want to see whether monsters can truly love. Back in the city, Lorenzo's convoy reached the abandoned shipping terminal. The kidnappers had already disappeared. Only burning vehicles remained. Empty. One bodyguard kicked open every container. Nothing. Another searched underground tunnels. Nothing. The security chief approached Lorenzo carefully. They planned this from the beginning. Lorenzo remained perfectly still. His silence frightened everyone more than shouting ever could. Then, he noticed something lying on the wet pavement. A paper grocery bag. Most of the food had spilled into muddy water. Only one item remained untouched. A loaf of fresh bread. He recognized it immediately. Elena bought the same bread every Thursday. He picked it up gently. The bag was still warm. They were close. Very close. The search expanded across Europe. Private satellites. Corrupt customs officers. Encrypted banking networks. Every available resource joined the hunt. Millions of dollars disappeared overnight. Entire criminal organizations suddenly found themselves under attack for refusing to share information. 3 rival gangs were eliminated before sunrise, not because they were guilty, because they wasted Lorenzo's time. His empire transformed into a machine driven by obsession. Even longtime allies became concerned. One of his oldest advisors entered the office after 48 sleepless hours. "You need rest." No response. "You haven't eaten." Still nothing. The old advisor sighed. "I've known you since you were 15. Lorenzo slowly looked at him. "I buried your father. I watched you build this empire. I've seen you survive betrayals that would have broken anyone." He hesitated. "But I've never seen you afraid." Lorenzo stared toward the city. Finally, he spoke. "I'm not afraid of losing." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "I'm afraid of arriving too late." Meanwhile, Elena awakened inside a luxurious bedroom. The room looked more like a palace suite than a prison. Large windows overlooked the sea. Fresh flowers decorated the table. Designer clothing hung inside an open wardrobe. Nothing appeared threatening. That frightened her even more. A woman in her 50s entered carrying breakfast. "You should eat." Elena immediately backed away. "Where am I?" The woman answered calmly. "Safe." "I don't feel safe." "You aren't meant to." Before Elena could ask another question, the woman quietly left. The heavy steel door locked behind her. Only then did Elena notice the cameras hidden inside the room. Someone watched every movement. Hours later, Victor entered personally. Unlike the armed guards, he wore an expensive gray suit. His silver hair was perfectly combed. His manners resembled those of a university professor, not a criminal mastermind. He poured tea for himself before speaking. "You must have many questions." Elena refused to answer. He smiled politely. "Good." Silence is wiser than panic. She finally gathered enough courage. "What do you want from me?" Victor studied her carefully. "Nothing." "Then why am I here?" "Because someone else wants you." She frowned. "I don't understand." "You will." He stood. "And when you do—" His expression changed. "Your life will never belong to you again." Back in Italy, Lorenzo received unexpected news. A young hacker working for the De Luca family had discovered encrypted financial transfers linked to Elena's past. Impossible. She had no criminal history. The hacker projected documents across the conference room wall. One payment appeared every month. Anonymous. The exact amount covered the nursing home's expenses. Another payment funded her apartment. Another quietly paid for medical treatment. All hidden through dozens of shell companies. His intelligence chief looked confused. "We thought these were your orders." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed. "I never authorized them." Silence filled the room. If Lorenzo hadn't been secretly helping Elena, then who had? The investigation uncovered an even stranger detail. Every anonymous payment had begun exactly 5 years earlier, long before Lorenzo ever entered the cafe. Someone else had protected Elena all along. Someone with enormous wealth. Someone capable of hiding financial trails from both governments and mafia networks. For the first time since the kidnapping, Lorenzo realized he knew almost nothing about the woman he believed he loved. Elena spent the next 2 days trying to escape. Every window was reinforced. Every hallway contained hidden guards. Every electronic device had been removed. She wasn't treated cruelly. She was treated carefully, like something extremely valuable. On the 3rd evening, Victor returned carrying an old wooden box. He placed it on the table. Inside rested several faded photographs. One showed a young couple holding a newborn baby. Another showed the same child playing beside the sea. The last photograph froze Elena's heart. It was her, at 6 years old. She looked up in shock. "Where did you get these?" Victor answered quietly. "They belong to your father." "My father died." "So you were told." Her entire world tilted. The old man slowly slid another document across the table. It was a birth certificate. Different names. Different signatures. Different parents. Nothing matched the life she remembered. She looked at Victor with trembling hands. "What is this?" The old man leaned forward. the beginning of the truth. And unfortunately, the reason Lorenzo De Luca will never be allowed to keep you. Far away, in the darkness of his private war room, Lorenzo received an encrypted message that contained only 7 chilling words. She isn't who you think she is. And beneath those words, a childhood photograph of Elena standing beside a man Lorenzo recognized instantly, a man he believed had died 23 years earlier. The photograph slipped from Lorenzo's hand. For several seconds, no one in the war room dared move. The image was old, faded by time, but the man's face remained unmistakable. Marco Bellini, one of the most feared Mafia strategists of his generation. Officially, Marco Bellini had been executed 23 years ago during the Blood Winter War, when the De Luca family wiped out nearly every member of the Bellini organization. Lorenzo had grown up believing the story. Everyone had. Yet there he was, smiling, alive, standing beside a little girl whose face could only belong to Elena. Impossible, unless history itself had been rewritten. Lorenzo's intelligence chief immediately enlarged the photograph across the massive digital display. Every wrinkle, every shadow, every detail underwent forensic analysis. Within minutes, the verdict arrived. No manipulation. It's authentic. Another analyst added quietly, the paper used in this photograph stopped being manufactured 21 years ago. Silence filled the room. Someone had hidden the truth for decades. Lorenzo slowly sat down. For the first time in years, memories he had buried deep inside began resurfacing. He had been 15 during the Blood Winter War, old enough to carry a gun, young enough to believe everything adults told him. His father had claimed the Bellinis were monsters responsible for countless betrayals. The war had lasted only 9 brutal days. When it ended, newspapers called it justice. The criminal underworld called it victory. No one questioned why almost every Bellini disappeared overnight. No one wanted to. The survivors never lived long enough to speak. His thoughts were interrupted by another encrypted report. One sentence stood out. No official death certificate exists for Marco Bellini. Lorenzo looked up sharply. What? The analyst nodded. We searched every archive. Hospital. Police. Military. Nothing. It appears his death was announced, but never legally recorded. Someone had created a legend, not a fact. Across the sea, Elena couldn't stop staring at the old photograph spread across the table. Her hands trembled. Nothing made sense anymore. Her childhood memories were fragmented. She remembered a small coastal village, a woman singing lullabies, a fire. Then, nothing. Everything after that belonged to another family, another life. She looked toward Victor. Tell me the truth. The old man remained silent. You owe me that. He sighed deeply before taking his seat. The truth is rarely kind. I don't care. You will. Victor folded his hands. 23 years ago, 2 Mafia empires destroyed each other. You know that much. She nodded. What nobody knows is that one child survived. Elena frowned. What child? You. Her breathing stopped. You were never meant to live. Rain battered the fortress windows as Victor continued. The Bellini family understood they were losing the war. So they made one final decision. They hid their youngest daughter. Elena whispered, You're saying, Yes. You were born Elena Bellini. The name echoed through the room like thunder. Bellini, the surname every criminal organization believed had vanished forever. She shook her head violently. No, my parents were wonderful people. They loved me. They did. But they weren't the ones who gave you life. Tears filled her eyes. They adopted you. When? The night your biological family disappeared. Elena's world fractured. Every birthday, every family photograph, every memory. Had she been living someone else's life? Or had her real life simply been stolen? Back in Italy, Lorenzo ordered every surviving witness from the Blood Winter War brought to headquarters. Only 3 remained alive. 1 refused to speak. 1 suffered from advanced dementia. The last was an elderly priest who had once hidden refugees during conflict. He arrived under heavy protection. Age had bent his back, but not his memory. Lorenzo dismissed everyone else. Only the two of them remained inside the chapel. The old priest looked at him sadly. I wondered if this day would ever come. You knew. I knew enough. Lorenzo's voice hardened. Then tell me. The priest closed his eyes. The Bellinis weren't completely destroyed. One child escaped. Lorenzo remained motionless. The order came from your father. What order? The priest looked directly into his eyes. Never search for the girl. Lorenzo's heartbeat slowed. My father knew. Yes. Why spare her? The priest hesitated. Because? She wasn't supposed to become a martyr. What does that mean? Dead children inspire revenge. Missing children become forgotten. The priest reached inside an old Bible. He removed a sealed envelope yellowed with age. I protected this for 23 years. Lorenzo accepted it carefully. Marco Bellini gave it to me. He said, only his daughter or the next De Luca leader should ever read it. The seal cracked open. Inside rested a handwritten letter. The ink had faded, but every word remained readable. If this letter is being opened, then history has already lied. Lorenzo continued reading. I know I will lose this war. I know my family will die. But understand this. We did not begin it. His hands tightened. The letter continued. Someone inside both families wanted us to destroy each other. They succeeded. Another page. If my daughter survives, protect her. She carries no guilt for our sins. The final sentence struck Lorenzo harder than any bullet ever had. Tell the next De Luca king that revenge built on lies creates only orphans. He lowered the letter slowly. For years he had honored his father's legacy. Now, he wasn't even certain that legacy deserved honoring. Meanwhile, Victor watched Elena carefully. You aren't my prisoner. She looked up angrily. I can't leave. Not yet. That's called being a prisoner. He smiled faintly. If I release you now, you'll die before sunrise. He walked toward the window. Every surviving faction that hated the Bellinis now knows you exist. The De Luca family. Independent cartels. Mercenaries. Governments. They all believe your blood carries unfinished business. Elena whispered, I've done nothing. I know. They don't care. She wrapped her arms around herself. So what happens now? Victor answered honestly. Now. The world decides whether your last name matters more than your innocence. At that very moment, inside an underground casino in Montenegro, leaders from 6 criminal organizations gathered around a circular table. News of Elena's identity had already spread through encrypted channels. One elderly boss placed a photograph on the table. The Bellini heir lives. Another smiled coldly. Then history gives us a second chance. A younger crime lord shook his head. Sell her. She'll bring billions. An older woman interrupted. No, if she lives. The Bellini name could unite old loyalties. Silence followed. Finally, the oldest man spoke. Then there's only one solution. He calmly slid a gold coin into the center of the table. Kill her. One by one, the remaining bosses added their own coins. The contract became unanimous. By sunrise, the largest bounty in modern Mafia history had been placed on one woman, not because of anything she had done, because of the family she had been born into. Back in Italy, Lorenzo received confirmation. The bounty reached 100 million euros. Professional assassins from 4 continents had already accepted the contract. Even some of his own allies quietly advised him not to interfere. His security chief entered the office. Boss, if we protect her, every organization in Europe becomes our enemy. Lorenzo stared at Elena's photograph. The waitress who smiled at strangers. The woman who fed abandoned animals. The person who still believed kindness mattered. She had never asked to be born a Bellini. She had never chosen any of this. He slowly stood. His expression became colder than anyone had seen in years. Prepare every available soldier. The security chief froze. Boss, this means war. Lorenzo's eyes never left the photograph. It already was. Then he issued the order that shocked his entire empire. From this moment forward, Anyone hunting Elena Bellini is hunting me. Across Europe, encrypted phones began vibrating simultaneously. The message was identical. The De Luca family has declared protection over Elena Bellini. Within minutes, the underworld erupted into chaos. And somewhere inside the fortress, Elena unknowingly walked toward a window, just as a red laser sight settled quietly over her heart. The tiny red dot rested perfectly over Elena's heart. She didn't notice it. She stood beside the fortress window, staring at the endless gray sea, trying to make sense of a life that had collapsed in less than 48 hours. Her name, her family, her past, everything she had believed was true had become a carefully constructed lie. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. She wished she could wake up back inside the little cafe, wiping flour from the counter while customers argued over coffee. She wished none of this had ever happened. Hundreds of meters away, hidden on a rocky cliff, a sniper slowed his breathing. His fingers settled against the trigger. The contract was simple. One shot, 100 million euros. No mistakes. The wind calmed. The crosshair stopped moving. He squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked like thunder. The reinforced glass shattered inward. Elena instinctively turned toward the sound. Before she could understand what had happened, a powerful force slammed into her. She crashed onto the floor. The bullet missed her chest by less than an inch. Instead, it buried itself in the shoulder of the man who had thrown himself in front of her. Victor. Blood spread rapidly across his gray suit. Guards stormed into the room. Automatic weapons erupted throughout the fortress. The sniper fired again, then disappeared into the storm before anyone could reach him. Elena crawled toward Victor. "You've been shot." The old man grimaced but remained strangely calm. "Good." She stared at him in disbelief. "What?" He looked toward the shattered window. "They've started." His bodyguards carried him toward the medical wing while explosions echoed somewhere below. The fortress had been breached, not by an army, by professional assassins working independently. Every one of them wanted the same prize. Outside, chaos spread across the cliffs. Small teams climbed impossible rock faces. Attack boats approached from the sea. Drones buzzed overhead. No one trusted anyone. Some assassins even turned on each other before reaching the fortress, hoping to eliminate competition. The 100 million euro bounty had transformed hunters into enemies. Within minutes, the coastline became a battlefield. Nearly 1,000 kilometers away, Lorenzo watched live satellite feeds from his command center. Every explosion, every movement, every breach. His intelligence division had hacked into several surveillance systems surrounding the fortress. His security chief pointed at the screens. "The fortress won't hold." Estimated collapse. Less than 90 minutes. Lorenzo nodded once. "Prepare the aircraft." The room fell silent. One captain finally spoke. "Boss, the fortress is outside our territory. So, we'd be invading another syndicate stronghold." Lorenzo's eyes remained fixed on the monitors. "Correct. That will trigger international retaliation." "Correct. We could lose half the empire." Lorenzo finally looked at him. "Then we'll rebuild it." No one argued again. Within 20 minutes, 3 heavily modified helicopters lifted off from a hidden airfield owned by the De Luca family. They flew without identification, without flight plans, without permission. Officially, they didn't exist. Inside the lead helicopter, Lorenzo checked his weapons with mechanical precision. His expression showed nothing. But everyone on board sensed the truth. Their boss wasn't launching a military operation. He was chasing someone he couldn't bear to lose. Back inside the fortress, Elena found herself escorted through underground tunnels. Sirens echoed continuously. Emergency lights painted the stone corridors crimson. Guards shouted orders in multiple languages. Some carried wounded comrades. Others dragged captured attackers. The air smelled of smoke and gunpowder. She had never imagined the world beneath organized crime. It looked less like wealth, more like endless war. They reached a reinforced bunker. Victor lay on an operating table while surgeons removed the bullet from his shoulder. He remained awake. As soon as Elena entered, he dismissed everyone except 2 trusted guards. "You should have left me." She shook her head. "You saved my life." He smiled weakly. I needed to. Why? His answer came after a long silence. Because I made a promise. A promise to whom? Victor stared toward the ceiling. Your father. Elena froze. My real father. He nodded. The night Marco Bellini disappeared. He placed you in my arms. He knew he couldn't protect you anymore. He asked me to do one thing. What? Make sure you reached adulthood. Her voice trembled. And after that, he said, let her choose her own future. Tears rolled down Elena's face. So you've known me my entire life? Yes. You watched me grow up? Yes. You knew where I lived? Yes. And you never told me. The old man closed his eyes. Because every year you believed you were ordinary was another year you stayed alive. Suddenly, alarms changed tone. One of the guards answered his radio. His face turned pale. What is it? The eastern gate. Has it fallen? The guard swallowed hard. No. Someone else arrived. Who? The guard looked directly at Victor. It's De Luca. For the first time since the attack began, Victor actually laughed. A deep, exhausted laugh. So, he came personally. Outside the fortress, Lorenzo's helicopters descended through heavy rain. The landing zone erupted under enemy fire. Before the aircraft even touched the ground, Lorenzo jumped. Bullets ripped through the air around him. His soldiers spread out with flawless coordination. Within seconds, they established a defensive perimeter. Assassins hidden among the rocks suddenly realized a terrifying truth. The hunter they feared most had entered the battlefield himself. Many chose retreat. Others believed the bounty justified the risk. They charged. The cliffs exploded into violence. Lorenzo advanced without hesitation. Every movement reflected years of brutal discipline. He wasted no ammunition, no motion, no emotion. The battlefield seemed to bend around him. His soldiers struggled merely to keep pace. One by one, the attackers fell back. Not because they lacked courage, because they understood. Inside the fortress, Elena heard the gunfire drawing closer. Each explosion echoed through the underground corridors. She looked toward Victor. Is he really here? Yes. Why? The old man answered quietly. You still don't understand. She frowned. What? He isn't fighting for Bellini. He isn't fighting for a symbol. He came. For you. Those words echoed inside her mind. For me? She remembered the quiet man who occasionally visited the cafe, the customer who always ordered black coffee, the man who rarely smiled, the one who never seemed comfortable around people. She had noticed him. She simply never imagined he was one of the most powerful men alive. The bunker doors suddenly shook under a massive explosion. Dust rained from the ceiling. The guards raised their rifles. Another blast followed. Then silence. Heavy footsteps approached from the corridor. Every guard aimed toward the entrance. The reinforced door slowly opened. Smoke drifted into the room. Through it emerged a tall figure wearing a black tactical coat stained with rain and blood. Lorenzo. For a moment, nobody spoke. His eyes searched the room until they found Elena. She stood frozen. Safe. Alive. Relief crossed his face so briefly that only Victor noticed it. Lorenzo took one slow step forward. He had imagined this moment throughout the entire rescue. He had rehearsed countless words during the flight. He wanted to tell her she was safe, that everything would be all right, that he would never let anyone hurt her again. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His throat tightened. His voice disappeared. The most feared mafia boss in Europe couldn't speak. Elena looked at him with confusion. Neither of them realized that somewhere above the fortress, a hidden drone camera had recorded the entire reunion, and thousands of kilometers away, an unknown man watched the footage with growing interest. He smiled coldly before whispering, so the rumors were true. Then he reached for an encrypted phone. Begin Phase 2. The order was transmitted across 3 countries, and before sunrise, a betrayal from inside Lorenzo's own empire would threaten to destroy everything he had come to save. Lorenzo stood motionless. The bunker around him echoed with distant gunfire, collapsing stone, and the frantic voices of soldiers securing the fortress. None of it reached him. His eyes remained locked on Elena. She was alive, bruised, terrified, but alive. For 3 endless days, he had prepared himself for the possibility of finding her too late. Instead, she was standing only a few steps away. The distance felt impossible to cross. He wanted to tell her she had nothing to fear anymore. He wanted to explain why he had watched over her for months without ever introducing himself. He wanted to tell her that the lonely life he had carefully built no longer made sense after meeting her. But his voice refused to obey. Every sentence died before reaching his lips. The king who had commanded thousands of men had become speechless before one woman. Elena stayed back at him. She remembered the quiet customer from a cafe, the man who always sat near the window, the one who never complained, never smiled much, yet somehow looked less lonely every time she placed coffee in front of him. Back then, she thought he was simply another businessman. Now she had watched armed men risk their lives to rescue her. Entire armies moved because he gave a single order. Who was he, really? More importantly, why had he come himself? Neither of them noticed Victor watching silently. The old man had spent decades studying powerful men. He recognized ambition, greed, hatred, fear. What he saw in Lorenzo's eyes was none of those. It was devotion, the kind that frightened even the strongest people because it demanded everything in return. Victor closed his eyes for a brief second. History was beginning to repeat itself. The silence finally broke when Lorenzo's security chief entered the bunker. "Boss!" His voice was unusually tense. "We have a problem." Lorenzo turned. What happened? The Eastern defensive teams intercepted encrypted communications. From whom? We don't know. But someone inside our organization transmitted your rescue plans before we arrived. The room became still. A leak. Inside the De Luca family. That was impossible. Only 7 people had known about the operation. Every one of them belonged to Lorenzo's inner circle. Lorenzo's expression hardened. "Confirm it." "It's already confirmed." The chief handed him a satellite tablet, timestamps, encrypted messages, flight paths, landing coordinates. Every movement of Lorenzo's rescue force had reached an unknown receiver nearly 40 minutes before takeoff. Someone close enough to know everything had betrayed him. Elena quietly watched the exchange. She understood little about organized crime, but she understood betrayal. Someone had wanted the rescue to fail. Someone wanted Lorenzo dead. The old Mafia boss slowly looked toward Victor. "Our conversation isn't over." Victor nodded. "I know. You'll come with me." "I expected that." Lorenzo then looked at Elena. For a brief moment, his cold expression softened. He gestured toward the exit. An invitation, not an order. She hesitated, then followed him. Outside, dawn slowly pushed through heavy storm clouds. The battlefield looked unreal. Destroyed boats burned along the shoreline. Smoke drifted above shattered stone walls. Dozens of abandoned weapons lay scattered across the cliffs. Medical teams moved among the wounded. No one celebrated. Everyone knew this battle had only been the beginning. As Lorenzo escorted Elena toward the helicopters, several soldiers lowered their heads respectfully. Not to her, to him. Yet something unusual happened. Each man also looked at Elena with quiet curiosity. Rumors had already spread. The mysterious waitress, the billionaire, the woman who made Lorenzo De Luca abandon every rule he had ever lived by. Legend traveled faster than helicopters. Before they boarded, Elena finally gathered enough courage to speak. "Why?" Lorenzo stopped walking. She looked directly into his eyes. "Why did you risk all this?" He tried to answer. His chest tightened. Again, no words came. Frustration flashed across his face. Something inside him simply refused to function whenever the truth reached his lips. Instead, he removed his black overcoat and gently placed it over her shoulders. The morning wind was freezing. She had been shivering without realizing it. The gesture answered more than words ever could. The helicopters lifted into the sky. Far below, the fortress disappeared beneath clouds and smoke. Inside the cabin, silence settled over everyone. Elena sat opposite Lorenzo. His soldiers pretended not to notice how often he glanced toward her. He wasn't checking for danger anymore. He was making sure she was still there, still breathing, Still real. Halfway through the flight, Lorenzo's encrypted phone vibrated. Priority 1. Only his intelligence director could use that channel. He answered immediately. What is it? The reply came without hesitation. We've identified the leak. His eyes narrowed. Name. Silence. Then, you won't like the answer. I didn't ask for your opinion. Another pause. It's Matteo. The world seemed to stop. Matteo Ricci, Lorenzo's closest friend. His second in command. The man who had fought beside him for nearly 20 years. They had survived ambushes together, buried friends together, built the De Luca empire together. Matteo knew every secret, every weakness, every safe house, every financial account, every escape route. If Matteo had betrayed him, the empire was already bleeding. Lorenzo slowly lowered the phone. His soldiers noticed the change immediately. Something had happened. Something serious. The security chief quietly asked, "Boss?" Lorenzo answered only 4 words. Prepare for internal war. Every face inside the helicopter turned pale. No enemy was more dangerous than one who already knew your entire kingdom. Several hundred kilometers away, Matteo entered a luxurious villa overlooking Lake Como. He dismissed his bodyguards before walking into a private library. An elderly man waited beside the fireplace. Impeccably dressed. Perfect posture. Silver hair. Sharp blue eyes. The same mysterious observer who had watched Lorenzo's reunion through the drone feed. Matteo bowed his head slightly. The rescue succeeded. I expected it would. Lorenzo knows there's a leak. The old man smiled. He'll suspect everyone. He already knows it's me. The smile disappeared. So our timetable changes. Matteo nodded. What are your orders? The old man slowly poured 2 glasses of wine. History is written by survivors. He handed Matteo a glass. Make sure Lorenzo doesn't become one. Back at De Luca headquarters, emergency protocols activated before the helicopters even landed. Every communication channel changed. Every security code was replaced. Every bank account temporarily froze. Trusted captains were isolated from one another until their loyalty could be verified. The entire organization entered lockdown. No one understood why. Only Lorenzo knew. When betrayal reached the throne room, every shadow became dangerous. As a helicopter descended onto the rooftop landing pad, Elena looked across the sprawling estate. She expected a fortress of luxury. Instead, she saw something strangely empty. Thousands of square meters, magnificent gardens, historic architecture, dozens of armed guards, yet almost no signs of life. No children's laughter, no family gatherings, no celebrations. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a monument built for loneliness. She suddenly understood something. The most powerful man she had ever met lived completely alone. Inside the mansion, Lorenzo led Elena into a beautifully restored sitting room overlooking the sea. Fresh flowers had already been placed there. A fire burned quietly in the fireplace. He signaled for servants to leave. The room became silent. Just the 2 of them. Elena took a deep breath. I still don't know who you really are. He reached into his pocket. Slowly, he placed a single object on the table between them. It was a small paper receipt from her cafe, the one from the very first day they had met. The receipt she thought had been thrown away months ago. She looked at him in surprise. You kept this? He nodded. Her eyes widened. You've carried it all this time. Another nod. She looked down at the faded paper. On the back, written in neat handwriting, was a date they had first met. Nothing else. No explanation. No confession. Just a memory that meant everything to one person. For the first time since her kidnapping, Elena smiled. A small, genuine smile. Lorenzo felt his heart race. He wanted to smile back. Before he could, the mansion's emergency alarm screamed through every hallway. Red lights flashed across the walls. Security doors slammed shut automatically. His security chief's voice echoed through the intercom. Boss! Matteo has seized a southern compound. He has over 200 loyal soldiers. And the chief's voice broke for the first time in years. He has your mother. Lorenzo froze. His mother had lived in complete secrecy for over a decade. Only 3 people knew her location: Lorenzo, his security chief, and Matteo. The betrayal had become personal, very personal. As Lorenzo reached for his weapon, another message appeared on every screen in the mansion. It contained only one sentence: "Bring Elena Bellini alone, or your mother dies before sunset." The message remained on every screen: "Bring Elena Bellini alone, or your mother dies before sunset." No one spoke. The mansion, usually disciplined and efficient, felt frozen beneath the weight of those 11 words. Lorenzo stared at the screen without blinking. For years, he had prepared for every possible attack: bombs, poison, political betrayal, financial collapse, assassination. But no strategy had ever prepared him for a choice between the 2 people he could not bear to lose. Elena slowly read the message again. She looked toward Lorenzo. His face showed almost nothing. To anyone else, he appeared calm. But she noticed something different. His hands. The fingers of his right hand had curled so tightly around the edge of the table that the polish would have begun to crack. He wasn't calm. He was barely holding himself together. The security chief entered at a run. "Boss!" "We confirmed the video." A tablet was placed on the table. The screen showed an elderly woman seated inside a small stone chapel. Her hands were tied. 2 armed men stood behind her. Despite the situation, her posture remained dignified. She looked directly into the camera. There was fear in her eyes, but no panic. She already knew who had betrayed them. The recording ended. Elena whispered softly, "Your mother." Lorenzo gave a single nod. It was the first confirmation she had ever received that someone so feared still had a family. Somehow, that made him seem more human. Another encrypted transmission arrived immediately afterward. This one was live. Matteo appeared on the screen. He looked exactly as Lorenzo remembered him. Calm, confident, almost amused. "My old friend." Silence. I never imagined we'd stand on opposite sides. Lorenzo's eyes never left the screen. "You crossed the line." Matteo smiled faintly. "No, you drew it." Around the room, every guard reached for a weapon as if Matteo could somehow step through the screen. He continued speaking. "You've changed. You used to understand sacrifice. You used to choose a family over everything." His smile disappeared. "Now you place one woman above an empire." Lorenzo finally spoke. "What do you want?" "Exactly what the message says. Bring Elena. Alone. No soldiers. No trackers. No tricks. And my mother." Matteo leaned closer to the camera. "If I see even one sniper. She dies before you arrive." The transmission ended. Silence returned. The security chief immediately shook his head. "It's a trap." Another captain agreed. "He'll kill both of them." A third officer added, "We attack now." Lorenzo remained motionless. Every suggestion sounded reasonable. Every strategy ended with someone innocent dying. Elena quietly stepped forward. "I'll go." The entire room turned toward her. "No," Lorenzo answered immediately. His voice was low, firm, absolute. It was the first complete sentence she had heard him speak directly to her. She looked surprised. "So, you can talk." He realized what he had done. The words had come naturally because he wasn't confessing his feelings, only protecting her. She took another step. "If I don't go, your mother dies. I won't allow it. You can't stop me." "I can." His voice remained calm. "I will." Their eyes met. For several seconds, neither looked away. Elena saw exhaustion behind his strength. Years of loneliness. Years of carrying impossible responsibilities. Lorenzo saw something equally dangerous. Compassion. She was willing to sacrifice herself for a woman she had never met. That was exactly why he couldn't let her. Meanwhile, several kilometers away, inside the abandoned monastery where Matteo had established his headquarters, another guest had arrived. The silver-haired man from Lake Como entered the chapel. Matteo greeted him respectfully. The bait worked. The old man glanced toward Lorenzo's mother. She seemed stronger than I expected. She raised Lorenzo. Then she had no choice. The old man smiled. Good. I dislike fragile people. Lorenzo's mother quietly observed the stranger. She had never met him before, but she recognized something. Authority, not the loud authority of politicians, the quiet certainty of someone who believed the world already belonged to him. She finally spoke. Who are you? The man answered politely. A ghost. Back at the mansion, Lorenzo disappeared into his private office. For several minutes, no one followed. The room contained almost nothing personal. Books, maps, weapons, old photograph locked inside a drawer. He opened it. Most pictures showed his father. Military operations, business meetings. Only one photograph mattered. His mother holding him as a small child. She was smiling. It was a smile he hadn't seen in years. He gently placed the picture on the desk. His breathing slowed. Then, an old memory returned. He had been 10 years old, terrified after witnessing his first execution. That night he couldn't sleep. His mother sat beside his bed until sunrise. She had whispered something he never forgot. Real strength isn't protecting power. It's protecting people. Back then, he hadn't understood. Now, he finally did. He returned to the conference room. Every captain stood, waiting. Lorenzo looked toward the security chief. Prepare my vehicle. The chief frowned. Boss, I'm going. Absolutely not. You can't. It's suicide. Lorenzo's expression never changed. I wasn't asking. Before anyone could argue further, Elena stepped in front of him. If you go alone, he'll kill you. Maybe. And then what? He looked directly into her eyes. Then at least you live. Her chest tightened. No one had ever chosen her life over their own. Certainly not someone who owed her nothing. She reached into the pocket of the coat he had placed around her shoulders. Inside, she found something unexpected. A tiny folded piece of paper. Curious, she opened it. It wasn't a secret message. It was an old receipt from the cafe, the same one he had shown her earlier. On the reverse side, hidden beneath the faded ink, was a sentence so lightly written it had almost disappeared with time. The first place that ever felt peaceful. She looked up slowly. The realization struck her all at once. The cafe had never mattered. She had, before she could say anything, alarms sounded again. This time they weren't from inside the mansion. They came from the radar room. A technician burst through the doors. Boss! We detected multiple armored convoys approaching. How many? 8. Identification. They are flying neutral signals. Another technician interrupted. More incoming from the north. And the west. The security chief stared at the tactical display. His face lost all color. They are surrounding us. Within minutes, confirmation arrived. The underworld had united, not officially, but practically. Independent crime families, mercenary groups, former Bellini loyalists, organizations hoping to claim the bounty, all were converging on De Luca territory. No one wanted Lorenzo to survive this crisis. The mansion transformed into a fortress. Heavy gates sealed. Anti-vehicle barriers rose from the ground. Snipers occupied every rooftop. Medical teams prepared underground shelters. Thousands of rounds of ammunition were distributed. A war unlike anything the De Luca family had seen in decades was about to begin. In the middle of the controlled chaos, Lorenzo quietly walked toward Elena. Everyone else instinctively gave them space. He stopped only a few feet away. His voice was barely above a whisper. When this begins, stay underground. She shook her head. I'm not hiding. You are. No. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, almost against his own will, he reached out. His fingers gently brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face. The gesture was so natural, so unexpectedly tender, that even his closest soldiers looked away, feeling they had witnessed something deeply private. Lorenzo immediately withdrew his hand. His composure returned, but it was too late. Elena had seen the truth in his eyes. He wasn't protecting the Bellini heir. He was protecting the woman he loved. Outside, the first artillery shell exploded against the outer wall of the estate. The mansion shook violently. Windows shattered across the eastern wing. The war had begun, and hidden among Lorenzo's own defenders, a second traitor quietly unlocked a service gate from the inside. The eastern service gate opened only 12 inches. It was enough. Outside the estate, nearly 40 armed mercenaries waiting in the darkness immediately understood the signal. The traitor was still inside. One by one, they slipped through the narrow opening, moving silently between hedges and marble statues. Night swallowed their black uniforms as they advanced toward the mansion. None of the rooftop snipers saw them. The attack had already begun from within. Inside the command center, tactical screens lit up with warning after warning. Unknown heat signatures, communication interference, security cameras shutting down one by one. The chief of security frowned. That's impossible. Lorenzo looked up. What is it? Someone's disabling our internal surveillance. External attack. The chief shook his head. No, the commands are coming from inside the estate. A second traitor. The realization spread through the room like poison. Lorenzo acted immediately. Seal Sector 3. Already offline. Seal Sector 4. No response. Manual lockdown. The controls had been overridden. For the first time that night, the De Luca estate no longer belonged entirely to the De Luca family. 3 floors below, Elena sat inside what was supposed to be the safest room in the mansion. 6 elite guards surrounded the entrance. The reinforced walls had survived military bombardments. She should have felt secure. Instead, an overwhelming sense of unease settled over her. Everything had happened too quickly. Within a single week, she had learned that her name wasn't really hers, that her family history had been stolen, that the world's most feared mafia boss had risked everything to save her. And now, an entire criminal underworld was coming for her. She closed her eyes. For the first time since childhood, she prayed. Above her, Lorenzo loaded another magazine into his pistol. His security chief approached quietly. We found the gate. And it was open from the inside. Who? We don't know yet. Lorenzo nodded once. No more assumptions. Verify everyone. 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 Even loyal captains surrendered their weapons for inspection. Fingerprints, communication logs, movement records. No one was exempt anymore. Trust had become a luxury Lorenzo could no longer afford. Outside the estate walls, armored vehicles continued arriving. One convoy carried mercenaries. Another carried independent assassins. Some came for the bounty. Others came hoping to watch Lorenzo fall. For decades, they had feared him. Tonight, they smelled weakness. Predators always recognize the scent. The first wave struck the northern wall. Rocket launchers thundered through the darkness. Stone exploded into the air. Machine gun fire followed instantly. The De Luca defenders answered without hesitation. Tracer rounds crossed the night like burning threads. Within seconds, the peaceful coastline transformed into a battlefield. Inside the mansion, Elena heard the explosions. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The guards exchanged nervous glances. One of them touched his earpiece. No signal. Another tried again. Still nothing. Their communications had been jammed. They were isolated. The oldest guard quietly moved toward the door. Stay behind us. Elena nodded. He opened the reinforced door just enough to inspect the hallway. It appeared empty. Too empty. His instincts screamed. He slowly raised his rifle. A silent shot echoed. The bullet entered through his forehead. He collapsed without making a sound. Everything happened at once. 3 masked attackers rushed through the smoke. The remaining guards opened fire. The corridor erupted into deafening violence. Marble shattered. Lights exploded. Blood stained the polished floor. Elena instinctively crawled behind an overturned cabinet as bullets tore through the room. One guard shouted, "Run!" She didn't hesitate, barefoot. Wearing only Lorenzo's oversized coat, Elena sprinted into unfamiliar hallways. Emergency lights flashed red. Smoke blurred her vision. Somewhere behind her, footsteps followed. Not guards. Hunters. She turned another corner and nearly collided with a young maid. The terrified woman grabbed Elena's arm. "This way." They disappeared into a narrow servant's passage hidden behind a decorative bookshelf. The wall slid shut just as gunfire reached the corridor. Meanwhile, Lorenzo received the report every commander fears. The safe room has been breached. His heart stopped. What? Communication lost. No visual. No survivors confirmed. For the first time in years, his control cracked. He didn't wait for strategy. He ran. His security chief shouted after him, "Boss! It's a trap!" Lorenzo ignored him. Every instinct overruled every tactical principle he had ever followed. Nothing mattered except reaching Elena. The hidden passage twisted beneath the mansion. The young maid struggled to breathe. "I know these tunnels. Keep moving." "Where do they lead?" "The old wine cellar." Then, a cliff exit. They hurried through darkness lit only by emergency lamps. Elena finally asked, "Why are you helping me?" The maid smiled sadly. "Because years ago, your kindness saved my little brother." Elena frowned. "I don't remember." "You paid for his medicine." "I thought it was anonymous." "It was. You never wanted thanks." The maid looked at her. Good people deserve someone to stand beside them. Before Elena could answer, a gunshot echoed behind them. The maid stumbled. Blood spread across her back. She collapsed to her knees. "No!" Elena caught her before she hit the ground. The young woman smiled weakly. "They found us." Footsteps approached through the tunnel. Several armed men emerged from the darkness. One lowered his weapon. "There she is." The bounty hunters advanced slowly. They wanted Elena alive. She was worth more breathing than dead. Suddenly, the tunnel lights went out. Darkness swallowed everything. A single gunshot echoed. Then another. Then silence. Someone moved through the darkness with terrifying precision. One by one, the bounty hunters fell. No one saw who fired. When the emergency lights flickered back on, only one figure remained standing. Lorenzo. His black suit was covered in dust and blood. His breathing was heavy. His eyes searched desperately until they found Elena. Safe. Again. He immediately knelt beside the wounded maid. The injury was severe. Too severe. The young woman looked at Lorenzo. "Protect her." He nodded. "I will." She smiled one final time. Then, her hand slipped from Elena's grasp. The tunnel became painfully quiet. Elena wiped tears from her face. "She died because of me." Lorenzo shook his head. "No." His voice was firm. "She died because evil men made that choice." It was the longest sentence he had spoken to her. She looked at him. "You really believe that?" "I know it." Before another word could be spoken, Lorenzo's earpiece came alive. His security chief sounded panicked. "Boss!" "We found the second traitor." "Who?" A painful silence followed. Finally, Antonio. Lorenzo froze. Antonio Moretti, the head of household security. The man responsible for protecting the estate for nearly 15 years. The man who had personally carried Lorenzo's father to safety during the Blood Winter War. Impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. Lorenzo slowly closed his eyes. Another brother, another betrayal, another piece of the family destroyed. When he opened them again, they were colder than ever. He looked toward the tunnel exit. "Take Elena to the underground command bunker." She immediately objected. "I'm not leaving you." "You are." "No. I've already lost too many people tonight." The words escaped him before he could stop them. Then, more quietly, "I'm not losing you." The silence between them became overwhelming. Elena's heart pounded. She had waited for an explanation since the day they met. She finally had one, not spoken as a confession, but as a truth. Before either of them could react, the entire tunnel shook violently. A massive explosion collapsed the passage behind them. Stone rained from the ceiling. Dust filled the air. Their escape route was gone. And from somewhere beyond the collapsing rubble, a familiar voice echoed through the darkness. "Lorenzo." It was Matteo. "You can't save everyone. And tonight, you'll finally learn that." Dust rolled through the collapsed tunnel like thick gray fog. Chunks of stone continued falling from the cracked ceiling. For several seconds, no one could see more than a few feet ahead. Then Matteo's voice echoed again through the darkness. "Lorenzo." It doesn't have to end like this. The words sounded calm, almost friendly, as though they were discussing old memories instead of standing on opposite sides of the battlefield. Lorenzo slowly raised his pistol. His eyes never left a cloud of dust. You crossed the line the moment you touched my family. A quiet laugh answered him. No, you crossed it the day you chose her. The dust finally settled. About 30 meters away, Matteo stepped into view. He wore black combat armor identical to Lorenzo's. A rifle rested casually over one shoulder. Around him stood nearly 20 heavily armed men. Every weapon was aimed directly at Lorenzo. Matteo smiled. It seems we're finally honest with each other. Elena looked between the two men. She immediately understood why this betrayal hurt so deeply. Neither man looked at the other with hatred. They looked at each other with disappointment, like brothers who had reached a point from which there was no return. Years earlier, long before Lorenzo became the head of the De Luca family, he and Matteo had been inseparable. They trained together, fought together, survived ambushes together. When Lorenzo was wounded during a cartel war, Matteo had carried him across nearly 2 kilometers under heavy gunfire. When Matteo lost his younger brother, Lorenzo stayed beside him for the funeral without saying a single word. Their loyalty had seemed unbreakable, at least, until now. Matteo slowly lowered his rifle. I'm giving you one chance. Lorenzo remained silent. Hand over Elena. Walk away. And your mother lives. No response. You keep the empire. Your men survive. You become king again. His eyes hardened. Oh, keep protecting her. And everyone you love dies. The tunnel fell silent. Even the armed men behind Matteo seemed to stop breathing. They all knew Lorenzo's answer mattered more than any bullet. Elena stepped forward. I'll go. Lorenzo immediately moved in front of her. No. She touched his arm. You can't sacrifice everyone because of me. I already made my decision. When? The moment I came for you. Matteo shook his head slowly. There. That's exactly what I mean. He looked directly at Elena. Do you know who he used to be? She didn't answer. He never allowed emotions to influence strategy. He never risked an empire for one person. He built the strongest criminal organization in Europe because he understood one rule. Matteo's voice became colder. People are replaceable. Lorenzo finally spoke. I don't believe that anymore. Those 6 words echoed through the tunnel. Even Matteo looked surprised. So, the rumors are true. Lorenzo lowered his weapon slightly. For years, I ruled through fear. I thought loneliness made me stronger. It didn't. It only made me empty. Elena looked at him in astonishment. This wasn't the cold Mafia boss she had imagined. This was a man finally allowing himself to tell the truth. Matteo sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. He slowly raised his rifle again. Then goodbye, old friend. Before either side could fire, every light inside the tunnel suddenly went out. Total darkness. A deep mechanical sound echoed through the walls. The entire mountain trembled. Matteo frowned. What was that? One of his men answered nervously. Not us. Another explosion followed, much larger. Stone cracked above everyone's heads. Back at the De Luca estate, the security chief stared at the tactical display in disbelief. Boss! No one answered. Lorenzo was still trapped underground. The technician pointed toward the coastline. Multiple unidentified vessels. How many? Too many. High-resolution satellite imagery finally loaded. The room became silent. More than 40 ships had appeared offshore. Not fishing boats. Not merchant vessels. Private military transports. Attack craft. Heavy weapons. An entire fleet. The security chief whispered, Who could afford this? Then another officer recognized one of the flags. His face turned white. The Dominion! The room froze. For decades, the Dominion existed only as a rumor. Not a mafia family. Not a government. Something far larger. An invisible organization that manipulated wars, elections, and criminal empires from the shadows. Whenever powerful organizations destroyed each other, the Dominion quietly absorbed what remained. Most people believed it was a myth. Tonight, the myth had arrived. Inside the tunnel, everyone heard the distant bombardment. Matteo slowly lowered his rifle. His expression changed. Confusion, then concern. This wasn't part of the plan. Lorenzo immediately noticed. You didn't know. Matteo looked toward the ceiling. No. Another explosion shook the mountain. Suddenly, both men understood. They had been used. Far above them, helicopters bearing no national markings crossed the coastline. Black armored soldiers descended on ropes. Their uniforms carried no insignias, no names, no flags, only a silver serpent stitched onto each shoulder. They didn't attack only the De Luca family. They attacked everyone. Mercenaries, assassins, Bellini loyalists. Anyone carrying a weapon became a target. Within minutes, the battlefield transformed into a massacre. Back inside the abandoned monastery, Lorenzo's mother watched through the chapel window. The silver-haired man stood beside her calmly. She spoke without looking at him. So this was your plan. He smiled faintly. Several plans. You manipulated Matteo. He manipulated himself. You manipulated Lorenzo. I merely observed his choices. She turned toward him. What do you really want? The old man's smile slowly disappeared. I want every great Mafia family erased. He walked toward the altar. For centuries, they believed they ruled the underworld. They were mistaken. They've simply been preparing it. For me. Meanwhile, Victor received the same reports inside his fortress. His remaining commanders looked terrified. The Dominion has revealed itself. Victor closed his eyes. I prayed I'd die before seeing this day. One officer asked, Can we stop them? The old man answered honestly, No. Back inside the collapsing tunnel, Lorenzo quickly assessed the situation. Matteo did the same. Years of fighting together made them think alike. Finally, Matteo looked at Lorenzo. If those reports are true, none of us survived separately. Lorenzo remained silent. Their soldiers looked between them in disbelief. Could two enemies become allies again? Elena suddenly remembered something Victor had said. The world decides whether your last name matters more than your innocence. Now she understood. The Bellinis, the De Lucas, every old family. Someone had been pushing them toward extinction all along. A radio crackled on one of Matteo's men's belts. An unfamiliar voice spoke calmly. Attention all surviving units. The Dominion thanks you for your cooperation. You have successfully weakened every remaining Mafia organization. There was a brief pause. You are no longer required. The transmission ended. Immediately afterward, automatic explosions echoed throughout the tunnel. Several of Matteo's soldiers screamed. Hidden explosive charges sewn into their tactical vests detonated simultaneously. Bodies were thrown against the walls. Fire filled the corridor. Matteo stared in horror. They planned to kill us too. Lorenzo grabbed Elena and pulled her behind a stone pillar as shrapnel ripped through the tunnel. When the explosions finally stopped, more than half of Matteo's men were dead. The survivors looked terrified. Not of Lorenzo, not of the bounty, of the enemy they had never known existed. Through the smoke, Lorenzo slowly stood. His eyes met Matteo's. Neither man spoke. They didn't need to. For the first time since the betrayal, they shared the same enemy. Then, from deep within the burning tunnel, slow footsteps echoed toward them. A lone figure emerged through the smoke. Perfect gray suit. Silver hair. Not a scratch on him. The mysterious old man smiled as though attending a formal dinner. He looked directly at Lorenzo, then at Elena, finally at Matteo. How wonderful. The entire family has gathered at last. The old man walked through the smoke without the slightest sign of urgency. Around him, flames consumed shattered support beams. Bodies lay motionless across the tunnel floor. The air reeked of gunpowder and burning concrete. Yet his polished shoes never seemed to touch the blood beneath them. He stopped exactly 10 feet from Lorenzo, then smiled. I've been looking forward to this meeting. No one answered. Even Matteo remained silent. For the first time since his betrayal, genuine uncertainty appeared in his eyes. The stranger slowly removed a pair of leather gloves. My name is Adrian Volkov. The name struck Victor's old warnings like lightning. Lorenzo had heard it only once before, years ago, spoken by his father after too much whiskey. If you ever hear the name Adrian Volkov, run. Back then, Lorenzo thought it was another bedtime story meant to frighten him into obedience. Now, the night maze stood before him. Adrian glanced around the tunnel. I must apologize. I hoped more of you would survive. His tone resembled a disappointed host whose guests had arrived late for dinner. Matteo's expression darkened. You used me. Adrian smiled. I rewarded your ambition. You promised me leadership. I promised you opportunity. Those aren't the same thing. Matteo took a threatening step forward. You lied. Adrian sighed. So emotional. He looked at Lorenzo. You were always a smarter one. Lorenzo kept his pistol lowered. Not from trust. From calculation. Everything about Adrian felt wrong. No visible body armor. No obvious weapons. No fear. Men who reached that level of confidence rarely depended on luck. Elena stepped closer to Lorenzo. Quietly, almost instinctively. Adrian noticed. His smile widened. So, the famous waitress. The woman who taught the king how to love. Elena stared at him. You've destroyed countless lives. Adrian nodded thoughtfully. I have. Why? Because weak systems deserve replacement. He slowly began walking again. The Mafia believed bloodlines gave them power. They inherited kingdoms they never owned. They ruled through fear. He spread his arms. So I gave them something stronger. Each other. Lorenzo finally understood. The blood went to war. Adrian nodded. My first masterpiece. Matteo frowned. What? Adrian looked almost nostalgic. I forged letters. Created false intelligence. Paid informants. Bribed politicians. I convinced the Bellinis that the De Lucas planned extermination. He turned toward Lorenzo. And I convinced your father the Bellinis intended exactly the same. The tunnel became completely silent. You started the war. I encouraged it. Thousands died. They chose to fight. Lorenzo's voice grew colder. You murdered children. Adrian shrugged. History rarely remembers numbers. It remembers winners. Elena felt her knees weaken. Her biological family, her adoptive family suffering. Everything traced back to one man. Not destiny. Manipulation. Matteo's breathing became heavier. You lied to me too. Adrian nodded. Of course. You wanted power. I needed distraction. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then Adrian said something that changed everything. Marco Bellini never hated your father. Lorenzo looked up sharply. What? They were trying to stop me. The words echoed through the tunnel. Even the surviving soldiers looked stunned. Adrian continued calmly. They discovered my organization too early. So I convinced them to destroy each other before they could destroy me. Lorenzo remembered the letter. Someone inside both families wanted us to destroy each other. Marco Bellini had known. His father, perhaps, had learned the truth too late. Adrian reached inside his coat. Instantly, dozens of weapons aimed at him. Instead of a gun, he removed an old photograph. He tossed it toward Lorenzo. It slid across the dusty floor. Lorenzo picked it up. His heart nearly stopped. The photograph showed two young men laughing together beside the sea. One was Marco Bellini. The other, his father. Friends, not enemies. They planned to expose me. Adrian's voice remained calm. So I buried them beneath history. Matteo lowered his rifle completely. My brother. You told me Lorenzo's father ordered his death. Adrian nodded. I did. It wasn't true. No. Then who? Adrian looked directly into Matteo's eyes. I did. The confession shattered whatever remained of Matteo's certainty. His younger brother had died because Adrian wanted loyal soldiers filled with hatred. Hatred created obedient men. Matteo's hands began shaking. You's my brother. Adrian answered simply. Yes. For years, Matteo had blamed Lorenzo's family. He had built his betrayal on that belief. Now, everything collapsed. Without warning, Matteo raised his rifle, not toward Lorenzo, toward Adrian. You took everything from me. Adrian didn't move. You finally understand. Matteo pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing happened. He looked down. The weapon had been disabled remotely. Every surviving mercenary's firearm locked at exactly the same moment. Electronic safeties engaged simultaneously. No bullets. No resistance. Adrian smiled. I designed those rifles. The tunnel light suddenly flickered back to life. Dozens of hidden doors opened along the walls. Black-armored Dominion soldiers emerged from every direction. Silent, disciplined, perfectly synchronized. Within seconds, Lorenzo, Matteo, Elena, and every survivor found themselves surrounded. The commander of the Dominion stepped beside Adrian. Area secured. No casualties on our side. Adrian nodded. Excellent. He looked at Lorenzo. Now, we can speak without interruption. Lorenzo slowly stepped in front of Elena. The movement was instinctive, protective. Adrian noticed again. You really would die for her. Lorenzo answered without hesitation. Yes. It was the simplest truth he had ever spoken. Adrian's smile faded for the first time. What a waste. He looked toward Elena. Do you know why I allowed you to live all these years? She remained silent. Because your blood opens doors. He nodded toward one of his officers. The officer activated a portable projector. Ancient architectural drawings appeared across the tunnel wall. Maps, symbols, underground vaults, banking records, encrypted ledgers. Adrian pointed to one location marked beneath the Alps. The Founder's Vault. For over 300 years, the original Mafia family stored more than money. They stored evidence, names, political agreements, royal secrets, fortunes beyond imagination. He looked directly at Elena. The vault recognizes only descendants of the founding bloodlines. Lorenzo understood immediately. The Bellinis. Precisely. Adrian smiled. You are the last confirmed Bellini heir. He turned toward Lorenzo. And your family possesses a second key. Everything suddenly made sense. Elena had never been kidnapped for ransom. Not for revenge. Not even for politics. She was a final piece of a centuries-old lock. Adrian spread his hands. So now, you have a choice. He looked at Lorenzo. Give me Elena. I open the vault. I reshape the world. You and your mother live. Then he looked at Elena. Or refuse. And every person standing here dies. The tunnel fell silent once more. Lorenzo didn't even glance at Elena. His answer came immediately. No. Adrian sighed almost sadly. I expected that. He raised one hand. Dominion soldiers lifted their rifles in perfect unison. More than 50 laser sights settled over Lorenzo's chest. Elena suddenly stepped in front of him. No. Now every laser sight moved onto her instead. Lorenzo grabbed her arm. She refused to move. If someone has to die, it won't be because you protected me. Their eyes met. Neither realized tears had filled both their eyes. For one impossible moment, the entire battlefield seemed to disappear. Then, a deafening explosion erupted from beneath the tunnel floor. The ground split open. Ancient stone collapsed into darkness. Everyone lost their footing. Adrian's smile vanished. He whispered only 2 words. The vault. The centuries-old chamber beneath them had just awakened. The earth roared beneath them. Stone cracked in every direction as the tunnel floor collapsed into a massive underground chamber that had remained hidden for centuries. Dominion soldiers lost their balance. Several disappeared into the darkness below. Dust swallowed the battlefield. For a brief moment, everyone became equal before gravity. Lorenzo reacted first. He wrapped one arm around Elena and threw both of them toward a narrow stone ledge just before the ground vanished beneath their feet. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Behind them, the tunnel collapsed completely. Massive slabs of rock crashed into the abyss. Screams echoed upward before being swallowed by silence. across a collapsing chamber. Matteo barely caught hold of a broken stone column. His rifle slipped from his hands and vanished into the darkness. Several Dominion soldiers reached for him. The column suddenly broke away. Matteo kicked off a falling stone and landed on another ledge just in time. He looked across the cavern. Lorenzo was still alive. So was Elena. Adrian Volkov had also survived. Unlike everyone else, he appeared almost pleased. He brushed the dust from his suit before studying the enormous chamber below. So it exists. His calm voice echoed through the darkness. 300 years. And finally, we found it. Emergency lights from shattered equipment flickered weakly. Their pale glow revealed something astonishing. This wasn't merely a cave. It was a forgotten underground city. Gigantic stone pillars stretched toward a ceiling lost in darkness. Ancient bridges connected towering platforms. Massive iron doors stood untouched by time. Marble statues of hooded men lined a central avenue leading toward an enormous circular vault. Gold symbols covered the walls. Some dated back hundreds of years. Others looked even older. Elena stared in disbelief. This place. Victor's words returned to her. Your blood opens doors. She finally understood. He hadn't been speaking metaphorically. Lorenzo slowly stood. His eyes scanned every shadow. This place was built to survive wars. Adrian smiled. Exactly. The Dominion commander approached Adrian. We've lost nearly 40 men. Irrelevant. Our communications are gone. Irrelevant. We've also lost satellite contact. Adrian looked toward the gigantic vault. Nothing matters now except what's behind that door. As the survivors cautiously descended into the forgotten city, they noticed something strange. No dust covered the central pathway. No cobwebs hung from the enormous doorway. Someone, or something, had been here before. Matteo reached Lorenzo from another stone bridge. For several 10 seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Matteo removed a knife from his belt. He placed it carefully on the ground. A symbolic surrender. I believed lies. Lorenzo remained silent. I betrayed my brother. Because I thought you betrayed mine. His voice broke. I can't undo what I've done. No, but let me help finish this. Lorenzo studied him for a long moment. Trust couldn't be rebuilt in minutes, but survival demanded difficult choices. Without speaking, he picked up the knife and handed it back. Matteo understood. It wasn't forgiveness. It was one final chance. Adrian watched the exchange with quiet amusement. How predictable. He sighed. Men always rediscover loyalty once they've lost everything. The group slowly advanced toward the circular vault. The enormous door towered nearly 30 feet high. It wasn't decorated with jewels or treasure. Instead, it displayed 2 family crests. The De Luca crest, the Bellini crest, intertwined, not opposed. Lorenzo stared at the carvings. Our families built this together. Adrian nodded, before greed divided them. Below the crest, ancient Latin words had been carved into black stone. Elena couldn't read them. Lorenzo quietly translated. Power without honor destroys blood. The sentence lingered in the silence, almost like a warning. At the center of the door rested 2 handprints carved into polished marble. One slightly larger, one smaller. Adrian stepped aside. Please. He looked directly at Elena. The vault recognizes your blood. She didn't move. Lorenzo stepped in front of her. No. Adrian's smile returned. You still don't understand. He pointed toward the surrounding walls. Hidden mechanisms slowly emerged from the stone. Hundreds of steel arrowheads, ancient counterweights, massive gears. This chamber was designed with one purpose. If the vault isn't opened, everyone inside dies. A deep metallic rumble echoed beneath their feet. Somewhere inside the walls, the ancient mechanism had awakened. Matteo examined the carvings carefully. There has to be another way. Adrian shook his head. There isn't. You've studied this place for 26 years, and I never possessed the correct bloodline. His eyes returned to Elena. But she does. Elena slowly walked toward the giant door. Lorenzo gently caught her wrist. His grip wasn't forceful, only desperate. She looked at him. If we don't try, everyone dies. You don't know what happens if you open it. No, but I know what happens if I don't. For several seconds, neither moved. Then Lorenzo slowly released her hand. It felt like letting go of the only certainty left in his life. Elena approached the stone. Her heartbeat echoed inside her ears. The chamber became impossibly quiet. She placed a trembling hand against the smaller imprint. Nothing happened. Adrian frowned. Impossible. Then Lorenzo noticed something. Beside the larger handprint, a tiny inscription almost erased by time. He leaned closer. It read, "Only those who choose each other may enter." His eyes widened. This isn't a blood lock. Everyone looked at him. It's a trust lock. Adrian's expression darkened. What? Lorenzo pointed toward the carvings. The founders expected betrayal. They didn't protect the vault with family. They protected it with unity. He looked toward Elena. It requires both families acting together willingly. For the first time since entering the chamber, Adrian looked genuinely alarmed. No, he stepped forward. Open it. Now, Lorenzo ignored him. He slowly walked beside Elena. Without speaking, he placed his hand into the second imprint. The moment their hands touched the ancient stone, the entire chamber shook. Golden light flowed through thousands of engraved lines across the floor. Ancient gears awakened after centuries of silence. The giant circular door began to move, not outward, inward, slowly, majestically. Everyone stared as the vault opened. There were no mountains of gold, no jewel crowns, no unimaginable treasure. Instead, rows upon rows of shelves filled the chamber. Books, ledgers, letters, treaties, maps, evidence, centuries of secrets. At the very center stood a single black pedestal. Upon it rested an old leather-bound journal. Nothing else. Adrian whispered in disbelief. No, this isn't possible. Lorenzo stepped toward the pedestal. He carefully opened the journal. The first page bore a familiar signature, Marco Bellini. The second signature, his own father's. The final page contained a message written jointly by both men. If this vault has been opened, then our children have survived where we failed. Lorenzo's hands trembled. He continued reading. There is no fortune here. The greatest weapon has always been the truth. Adrian's face slowly lost all color. He had spent decades hunting unimaginable wealth. Instead, the vault contained proof of every crime he had ever committed, every manipulation, every bribed government, every orchestrated war, every murdered family, centuries of carefully preserved evidence. Enough to destroy not only Adrian, but the entire Dominion forever. Adrian's calm mask finally shattered. He looked at the journal, then at Lorenzo, and, for the first time in decades, he reached for a gun with panic in his eyes. Adrian Volkov's hand disappeared beneath his coat. This time, he wasn't reaching for another document. He was reaching for survival. The polished mask he had worn for decades had finally cracked. For the first time since anyone had met him, fear appeared in his eyes. Not fear of Lorenzo, not fear of Elena, fear of the truth. His pistol cleared the holster. Lorenzo moved at the exact same instant. 2 shots shattered the silence. The echoes rolled across the ancient vault like thunder. Adrian staggered backward. A crimson stain spread across his shoulder. Lorenzo's bullet had struck first, but Adrian's shot had not missed. The round slammed into Lorenzo's left side. He stumbled against the stone pedestal. The ancient journal slipped from his hands. Elena caught it before it struck the floor. Lorenzo. She rushed toward him. He forced himself upright before she could reach him. It's nothing. Blood immediately soaked through his black shirt. It was far from nothing. The Dominion soldiers reacted instantly. Rifles came up in perfect formation. Before they could fire, Matteo threw himself directly between Lorenzo and the incoming barrage. Down! Automatic fire exploded through the chamber. Bullets tore into marble pillars. Ancient statues shattered into clouds of stone. Centuries of silence disappeared beneath modern warfare. The surviving De Luca guards answered from behind broken columns. The Bellini loyalists who had escaped the tunnel joined them without hesitation. For the first time in history, the two families fought side by side, not against each other, against the man who had destroyed them both. Adrian retreated toward the far side of the vault. His commander rushed beside him. "We have to leave." Adrian ignored him. His eyes never left the journal in Elena's hands. "Kill the girl." The commander hesitated. "But the evidence." "I said kill her." 3 Dominion soldiers broke away from the firefight. They sprinted directly toward Elena. Lorenzo saw them. Despite the pain tearing through his side, he moved. The first attacker raised his rifle. Before he could fire, a knife spun through the air. It buried itself in his throat. He collapsed instantly. Lorenzo looked up. Matteo, without a word, Matteo had thrown the blade. The second attacker closed the distance. Elena backed away, clutching the journal against her chest. She had never held a weapon in her life. She had no idea how to fight. The soldier reached for her. A deafening gunshot echoed. The man collapsed at her feet. Lorenzo lowered his smoking pistol. Only one attacker remained. The final Dominion operative drew a handgun. He ignored everyone else. His orders were clear. Kill Elena. Destroy the journal. End the Bellini bloodline forever. He fired. Time seemed to stop. Lorenzo saw the muzzle flash. He saw Elena turning toward him. He knew the bullet's path. Without thinking, he stepped in front of her. The round struck his chest. The impact drove him backward. His pistol slipped from his hand. Silence fell over the battlefield. Lorenzo. Elena caught him before he hit the ground. His breathing became shallow. Blood spread rapidly beneath him. She pressed both hands against the wound. "No. No. Stay with me." For the first time, Lorenzo smiled. A real smile. Small. Peaceful. He gently touched her face. His fingers trembled. "I." His voice failed again. The words refused to come. Even now, even here, tears blurred Elena's vision. "You don't have to speak." "I know." He looked at her with quiet disbelief. She leaned closer. "I've known for a long time." "The receipt." "The coffee." "The way you always looked at me." "The way you never let anyone hurt me." "You never needed words." A single tear rolled down Lorenzo's face. He had spent his entire life believing silence protected him. Now, silence was finally understood. Across the chamber, Adrian watched with growing rage. "Enough!" He snatched a rifle from one of his fallen men. If he couldn't control history, he would erase it. He aimed directly at Elena. Before he could fire, Matteo stepped into his path. Adrian frowned. "Move!" Matteo shook his head. "My brother died because of you. My family died because of you. My honor died because of you." He slowly raised Lorenzo's fallen pistol. "You don't get another generation." Adrian laughed coldly. "You think one bullet changes history." Matteo answered quietly. "No, the truth does." He pulled the trigger. The bullet struck Adrian squarely in the chest. He staggered backward. Another shot, then another, not from Matteo, from surviving De Luca's soldiers. Bellini loyalists, even wounded Dominion operatives abandoned by their own organization. Years of fear ended in a single moment. Adrian Volkov collapsed at the foot of the ancient vault. His eyes remained open, fixed forever on the evidence he had spent 26 years trying to possess. His commander looked around the chamber. Their leader was dead. Their mission had failed. Without another word, he ordered a retreat. The surviving Dominion soldiers disappeared into hidden escape tunnels. The war, at least for tonight, was over. The chamber became eerily quiet, broken only by Lorenzo's weakening breaths. Victor finally arrived with the last of his surviving men. He immediately knelt beside Lorenzo. "The ambulance is 10 minutes away." Lorenzo slowly shook his head. He knew the wound was too deep. Elena refused to accept it. "No, you're going to be fine. You promised to protect me. You don't get to stop now." Her voice broke completely. "I won't let you." Lorenzo looked at her, then toward the journal, then back to her. He gathered every remaining ounce of strength. His lips moved. This time, The words came, barely above a whisper. "I love you." The sentence was almost lost beneath the echoing chamber. But Elena heard every syllable. She closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her face. "I love you too." For a brief, perfect moment, the lonely Mafia king finally heard the words he had spent a lifetime believing he never deserved. Then, the distant sound of helicopters echoed from above. Not Dominion helicopters. Government helicopters. Special forces. Intelligence agencies. International police. The evidence inside the vault had already begun reaching the outside world through encrypted emergency transmissions activated when the journal was opened. Within minutes, the entire criminal order that had ruled Europe for centuries would begin collapsing, and whether Lorenzo lived long enough to see that new world remained uncertain. The sound of helicopters grew louder. Searchlights swept across the shattered coastline above the ancient vault. For the first time in centuries, the world outside was coming, not as allies, not as enemies, but as witnesses. Medical teams rappelled into the underground chamber while international special forces secured every entrance. The surviving Dominion soldiers disappeared into hidden tunnels before they could be captured. They abandoned weapons, documents, equipment, even their dead. Without Adrian Volkov, the organization had lost the one man capable of holding it together. Elena refused to move from Lorenzo's side. Doctors tried to examine him. She wouldn't let go of his hand. One surgeon knelt beside her. "Please, if we don't operate immediately, he won't survive." She slowly released him, only after Lorenzo squeezed her fingers one last time, as if silently promising, "I'm still here." The operating helicopter lifted into the morning sky. Inside, surgeons worked without stopping. Blood transfusions, emergency ventilation, cardiac monitoring. Every second mattered. Lorenzo drifted in and out of consciousness. Fragments of his life passed before him. The first gun he had ever held. His father's impossible expectations. Friends buried too young. Enemies he could barely remember. Empty birthday dinners. A mansion filled with silence. Then, a small neighborhood cafe. A waitress placing lemon cake beside black coffee. "You look like someone who forgot what sweetness tastes like." For the first time in decades, he smiled while unconscious. Meanwhile, the ancient vault became the center of the largest international investigation in modern history. The leather journal was only the beginning. Hidden compartments opened throughout the chamber. Thousands of original documents emerged. Signed agreements, secret bank accounts, names of corrupt ministers, judges, corporate executives, intelligence officers, crime bosses. Every century had added another layer. Every generation had preserved the truth. The founders had understood something remarkable. Gold could be stolen. Truth could not. Within 48 hours, governments across Europe issued hundreds of arrest warrants. Private banks froze billions in criminal assets. Politicians resigned before investigations could begin. Several intelligence directors disappeared. News networks interrupted regular programming. The world called it the Vault Revelation. The underworld called it something else. The end of the old kings. Matteo surrendered voluntarily. He walked into an international command center carrying no weapon, only Adrian Volkov's encrypted files. Investigators expected resistance. Instead, he answered every question. He confessed every crime he had committed. He accepted responsibility for every betrayal. When asked why, he gave only one answer. "I spent years living a lie. I won't die inside one." His testimony became the final blow that destroyed the Dominion's remaining leadership. Victor quietly disappeared. No one knew where he went. Before leaving, he visited Elena one final time. She was sitting outside the hospital overlooking the sea. He placed an old wooden box beside her. The last promise. She opened it slowly. Inside rested childhood photographs, letters written by Marco Bellini, a tiny silver necklace, and one final envelope. "My father." Victor nodded. "He wanted you to receive these. Only after the war ended." She looked up. "Will I ever see you again?" The old man smiled gently. "You were never meant to belong to my world." He turned toward the ocean. Neither was Lorenzo. Without another word, he walked away. Elena never saw him again. 3 weeks passed. Lorenzo remained unconscious. Doctors prepared Elena for the worst. The bullet had narrowly missed his heart. But infection, blood loss, and years of accumulated stress had pushed his body to its limits. Every morning, she visited his room. She brought fresh coffee and a small slice of homemade lemon cake, exactly as she had done the first day they met. She talked to him for hours, about ordinary things, the weather, the flowers outside, the children playing in the hospital garden. She never spoke about fear. She never said goodbye. On the 22nd morning, she quietly stood to leave. Then, a weak voice spoke behind her. "I think the coffee is getting cold." She froze. Slowly, she turned around. Lorenzo was awake. His face looked pale. His voice was rough. But his eyes were alive. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Then Elena laughed through her tears. "You scared me." "I know." "You nearly died." "I know." She crossed the room in 2 quick steps and embraced him carefully. For the first time in his adult life, Lorenzo hugged someone back without hesitation. The loneliness that had ruled his entire existence finally loosened its grip. Months later, the De Luca estate looked completely different. The armed checkpoints were gone. The underground prison had been demolished. Several buildings became rehabilitation centers funded with confiscated criminal wealth. The massive dining hall that had once sat empty now hosted charity dinners every weekend. Children laughed in gardens that had once trained assassins. The empire Lorenzo inherited no longer existed. By his own choice, one evening, he and Elena returned to the tiny cafe where everything had begun. It had survived the chaos. The owner welcomed them with tears. Nothing had changed. The old wooden tables, the smell of fresh bread, the faded paintings. They sat beside the same window. The owner placed 2 coffees and a slice of lemon cake on the table. Without being asked, they smiled. Lorenzo reached into his wallet. Carefully, he unfolded the old cafe receipt he had carried for nearly a year. Its edges had become worn. The ink had almost disappeared. Elena looked at it and smiled. "You still have it." "I always will." She took a pen from her purse, turned the receipt over, and beneath his faded words, "The first place that ever felt peaceful," she wrote one new sentence, "because this is where you stop being alone." She handed it back. Lorenzo read it silently. Then, without struggling, without fear, without losing his voice, he looked into her eyes and said, "I love you." She smiled the same warm smile that had first disarmed the most feared man in Europe. "I know. And I love you." A year later, the last international tribunal connected to the Dominion concluded its final session. The Bellini and De Luca names no longer appeared in criminal investigations. Instead, they appeared on the foundation that rebuilt schools, hospitals, and shelters using the fortune recovered from the Dominion. Many people argue that a man like Lorenzo De Luca could never truly erase his past. He never tried. He accepted every mistake, every scar, every consequence, because redemption was never about pretending darkness never existed. It was about choosing the light despite it. People still told stories about the legendary Mafia king who vanished at the height of his power. Some claimed he had been killed. Others believed he ruled from the shadows. Only a handful of people knew the truth. On quiet mornings, if someone visited a small cafe overlooking the Mediterranean, they might see a tall man with silver beginning to appear in his dark hair. He always ordered black coffee. Someone always placed a slice of lemon cake beside it. And across the table sat the woman who had taught him that the strongest kings were not those who conquered the world, but those who finally found someone worth living for. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemies, it's refusing to become them.